أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Assalamu alaikum all, and thank you all for joining us. With me tonight, I have Dr. Shaza Khan. Dr. Shaza Khan, Assalamu alaikum.
Walaikum assalam. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. So I'd just like to quickly introduce you to our members. Dr. Shaza is currently the Interim Executive Director of the Islamic Schools League of America, also known as ISLA, a non-for-profit organization that supports the quality and growth of full-time Islamic schools in North America, and through her research, professional development, and networking. Dr. Khan received her PhD from the University of Rochester, where she researched the identity formation of Muslim American high school students. Her research interests include identity formation, youth programming, and positive youth development. And so that's why we're focusing on the youth today, inshallah. So are we ready to get started?
Yeah.
Okay, so I understand that your own struggles developing a strong Muslim American identity led you to the research you have conducted on Muslim American identity formation and youth programming. What were some of your struggles, and how did you come to embrace your identity as a Muslim American?
Yeah, so I was I was born and raised in Rochester, New York. My parents were immigrants to the US, so I was what you call a second generation American. And as many second generation children kind of struggle with, is that their parents really want to hold on to that culture and cultural traditions, I should say. And so while on the other hand, we're growing up, in this American space that all of our peers are, and feeling very American, obviously we are going to public school, we're participating in traditional cultural practices that the broader public participates in. But on the other hand, when we get home, we're told to wear shalwar kameez, traditional ethnic clothing, or asked to speak in Urdu. There's other kinds of cultural expectations, gendered and otherwise, that also kind of color that adolescent period. So for me in particular, I had different phases. I think we all do. And, I just want to start off also saying that identity isn't something we achieve. It's something that we're constantly working on. And so it really is that quintessential element of adolescence, but it's something that we're going through when we become a new mother or father, or, a professor at a university or a teacher. So for me,
how do you define identity? If it's something that we're constantly changes, but within one particular moment, how do you have a strong sense of identity? If I guess some of us are confused with what it means to identify yourself with things.
Yeah, and identity is partially, defined through what you identify yourself with. And so exactly, if there's something particularly salient in a certain moment, for example, for me, growing up, it was September 11th, 2011. For the US, that was a huge moment. And I know for the rest of the world in many ways too, because of actions that were taken by our government afterwards. But for Muslims in particular in the US, that was a moment where I remember as a young adult at the time, a lot of young women taking on hijab. And now being 17, 18 years away from that, seeing that many of them removed it later on. And it was really not something that I can say for certain, except that I've spoken to many of them. Many of them were my friends and relatives, and know that there was a sense of political activism in that identity. And that identity that they were taking on. So identity really, simply is who you define yourself as, or how others define you. Because sometimes it's the interplay of both that really makes that difference. And so growing up, I had a time where I wanted to reject everything Pakistani. And instead of even embracing any of that, I really wanted to bring my Muslim identity to the forefront. And I think that was when I started to wear hijab. So a lot of times you do find that wearing hijab is an act of resistance in some ways, as much as it is an act of worship. So, so some of those struggles that I went through of, and then finally coming to see that I can actually embrace um, my Pakistani roots and heritage and my American identity. I remember after September 11th, I had been wearing hijab. I started to wear it when I was in 11th grade as a high schooler. And I remember after September 11th, I wore abaya and this is a public interview. People can take this as they will, but at the moment, I really felt it important to show that, look, I'm a Muslim American. And so I started to wear jeans really purposefully. I mean, with a long shirt and trying to maintain those standards of modesty. But I had a really strong purpose to what I was doing and how I was identifying myself with and how I wanted others to identify me. And so I started to do that.
SubhanAllah, my story is a bit different in terms of I didn't want to reject my Lebanese background. I wanted to embrace it in high school. However, I struggled because I didn't know much about the culture. And so that was my identity struggle. And I didn't know what to associate myself with. Do I call myself fully Australian with a Lebanese background that I'm not too familiar with, or just Australian or Lebanese? I remember it was trendy to just say, I'm Lebanese and that's it.
Sure.
And so for me, I think Islam had helped me a lot to have a strong sense of identity because I'm so content with just that for now. And I think I didn't get the opportunity to embrace Islam from a young age within my household. So after high school, that's when I got to really delve deep into that and have a strong connection to that. SubhanAllah.
Alhamdulillah.
So it wasn't a political thing, but it was a struggle because it wasn't accepted even amongst family members.
Absolutely.
So that was my struggle. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a common theme, particularly amongst Muslim youth of immigrant backgrounds, because sometimes the parents want to hold on to the cultural practices a little more, and that Muslim identity becomes a resistance to even the ethnic element.
Yes, definitely.
The identity is complex, absolutely. And youth are, in particular adolescents. So when I say adolescents, it really usually typically refers to kids between the age of 10 to 20. Every culture, every society is different.
Yeah.
But that's really a period where we're really searching for crafting our own definition of who we are. What are we going to pursue? What are we going to do with ourselves and our life? And how are we going to define ourselves to others? So,
and wanting to find comfort in that.
Absolutely. And trying to find spaces where you can be yourself without, because a lot of times, Sama, just like you mentioned, and it's similarly how I experienced too, even our homes aren't places where we can fully embrace all of all of us, all of the different pieces of us. And so, and schools have their different challenges. There's a popular youth culture, and there's the in group, and there's cliques, and you have to, I remember in middle school, this was prior to wearing hijab, I went through a phase where I was trying to pass, and I grew up in New York, and there were, I could pass as Puerto Rican. And so I did. I didn't want to be known as Muslim or Pakistani, and I just wanted to be normal and, fit in. And so that was my way of doing that. So it is a very complicated and trying time. And if you can't find that space of belonging, it can lead to a lot of negative social and emotional challenges that the youth has to face.
Yeah, definitely. So leading into my next question, your doctoral research examined a youth program called the Muslim Interscholastic Tournament, or MIST. Can you tell us about MIST? What is it? Who participates in it? What are the benefits?
Yeah, Muslim Interscholastic Tournament, or MIST, is an interscholastic tournament for and focused on Islam and Muslims. And it is for high school students. It started in 2001 in Houston, Texas. It was a young female, Shazia Siddiqui, college student. She had just graduated from high school and she was going to college, and she had an idea to create an interscholastic tournament where there would be competitions in multiple academic and non-academic fields focusing on a theme related to Islam. And mashallah, now 17 years later, there are 17 regions. I wrote it down somewhere. I believe there's 17 or 18 regions throughout the US in different cities. There's over 6,000 competitors and 472 high schools that participate in MIST. And this competition takes place on one weekend in each of these regions. Usually in the spring, close to the end of the semester over here, it's April, May, June. And students plan and prepare for their MIST competition throughout the academic year. They create a team in their high school, and it really creates, and one of the reasons why Shazia created this, and I think the reasons for its rapid growth, is because it's responded to that need that we just spoke about, of creating a space where youth can really feel like they belong and a safe space for them to explore Islam. And it's probably one of the only places that I've come across where youth, Muslim youth, can explore their Islamic identity through so many creative means. So
could you give us some examples of what's available? Because it sounds really broad in terms of what they could actually delve deep into, what projects they could partake in.
So aside from sports, which obviously isn't focused on the theme, this is just another way to get the interest of youth. But there are soccer and basketball tournaments, for example, that are part of MIST. But to be able to participate in that for the kid that's totally, just wanting to do that, they also have to participate in at least one or two other competitions. Now, the range of competitions that you can choose from include things as academic as knowledge and Quran. So there are certain books that kids have to read, and then there are knowledge tests that are based off of those books. There are Quranic verses that they have to recite, and they're graded or scored on their tajweed and different elements of that. But then there's even things like 2D art and 3D art, community service. What else is there? Drawing a blank right now. Community.
So say, for example, I wanted to participate and I'm interested in art, but it's not available. Or do I initiate as a student?
Yeah. When you say it's not available, I'm not sure.
So for example, there's no one's facilitating that in the competition. Unless, is it coming from the students who they put their hand up and say, well, I'm interested in this, can we make this happen?
So there's a national body that organizes, and as the organization has really grown and developed and expanded, they have created standards, kind of standard competitions that occur. There's a rule book. Every single competition has rules and ballots that judges use, and the students see what they're going to be judged on. So when a region, for example, I founded, alhamdulillah, I feel really blessed when after I completed my doctoral studies, I felt so, I really believed in MIST. I was convinced of its impact because the research that I did really demonstrated it, mashallah, the benefits of it were so strong. And so when I moved to Chicago and saw that such a big city with such a strong Muslim population and strong Muslim institutions didn't have a MIST, I established one over there. So in establishing it, I just needed to use that rule book and I had an awesome team of volunteers to help me put that weekend together. And on the flip side, when I started teaching here in Austin, Texas, at an Islamic school, I was able to be a coach of an of a MIST team. And so I got to see it from that angle too. And so, yes, I guess to really directly answer your question, there are certain competitions that happen in every single region. And that regional director ensures that there are judges, and they don't have to do much, except to get those judges to come in. And then it's up to the kids to be able to organize themselves. In different schools, it's done differently. In public schools over here, you might not have an advisor that is going to be engaged in really like scaffolding your progress throughout the year. There are a lot of kids that just do this last minute and, throw something together just to be part of this awesome congregation of Muslim youth. Like, at least in the US, we don't have such a large gathering of youth in many other spaces, except for these kinds of youth programs, like Muslim Youth of North America is another one. And they might have camps and stuff. But yeah, so kids participated, and at Austin Peace Academy, we did have various, we had identified coaches that were going to work. I worked with students on community service project. So I made sure that they were on task and, thinking deeply about the theme and trying to make connections, because that is where some of that exploration of their identity really occurs. And there's—
Yes, my next question. As a coach, how did it add depth to your understanding of the impact of MIST on our youth?
So my research for my doctoral studies was on Muslim American high school students, predominantly those going to public schools. That was really the focus that I had. I felt that there are a lot more challenges, and that was kind of drawing from the experience that I had going to a public school, being a minority in many different ways. And so my results and my analysis, my interviews, of course, were focused on that population. When I was teaching at the Islamic School here in Austin Peace Academy, and was a coach, I was able to see that the benefits of MIST, and I know we've referred to them, I'll speak about them more specifically in just a minute, really transferred over even to the Islamic school environment. Not having gone to an Islamic school as a student, I think I was not as embracing of the challenges that those students were facing still. I thought maybe, they had it a little easier.
Yeah. But I think I had the same idea because I was public schooled.
Yeah.
I was an advocate for public schooling because of that idea. Oh, they have it easy. They're looked after. Yeah. And it's totally different when you enter into the environment.
Well, there's a whole nother set of challenges of being policed and, and a different range of the same intensity, but it really created a sense of strong Muslim identity and Muslim American identity, and helped them have so much school pride. I think that sometimes students in Islamic schools also kind of have that chip on their shoulder where it's like, yeah, we go to an Islamic school, it might be a little bit, just like a lot of students struggle with identifying themselves as Muslim in public, especially given different sociopolitical climates. I think that sometimes that's even more pronounced if you go to an Islamic school. But being part of MIST really gave them this sense of team identity, because you go in, although you compete in many of these competitions as an individual, you go in as a team based in your high school. And there are different kind of lesser weighty competitions like Team Spirit. Oh my goodness, the environment and the atmosphere of MIST competitions is so intense. It's so energetic and bubbling. It's bursting with excitement because you got kids wearing their team uniforms, and they've got mascots. They've got, we literally had a wolf as a mascot for Austin Peace Academy because that is their school mascot. And some of that thinking for the school also came around being part of MIST, was like, oh, we're supposed to have a mascot too, like just becoming more aligned with what and so you have students from public schools, private schools, homeschooling, all high school students participating in MIST. And that's another great way to build unity amongst the Ummah, if only symbolically, even if there aren't lifelong relationships being built amongst those students. There is this symbolic sense of unity that is very important in our deen. We do this in Hajj. We all wear the same clothes, and a lot of our scholars have identified that as being a way to help us identify unify in many ways. So yeah, some of the, I just wanted to mention really quickly some of the benefits, because I know I keep alluding to them. Just really quickly, supportive peer groups, in particular for public school students. And this isn't just me finding this research with MIST. Jasmine Zine, Dr. Zine in Toronto looked at Muslim student associations in Canada. I think that the research that I read was published in 2000. So she looked at Muslim student associations as a place for Muslim youth to find support and create spaces of resistance against Eurocentrism that was very predominant in the public schools, and the curriculum, and in the even more subtle ways of like what holidays are being taken out. Similar to those findings, MIST corroborated that. My research on MIST corroborated that, and that, yeah, absolutely, this helps peers create a support system, sense of belonging, the opportunity to have leadership roles, and a feeling of just being safe and valued, which seems so basic, but is an essential element of our adolescence, of healthy development, I guess I would say mostly.
The benefits are quite vague. Your examines the key features of Strong Youth Program. For those who are unable to replicate MIST in their own communities, what do they need to know about the core elements of successful youth programming?
Yeah, well, first of all, I spoke to Shazia Siddiqui yesterday just to catch up with her, the founder of MIST, and it is very possible for anyone. I was saying, you might get some contacts from Australia now wanting to open up a MIST over there. And she was like, yeah, send them my way. So if anybody's interested in that, I'd be happy to put you in touch with Shazia. But, you don't have to have a MIST in your region, in your area, to support Muslim youth. If you're looking to support Muslim youth and you want to create a youth program, some of the key elements of successful youth programs is that they're youth-centered, first and foremost, that it's based in something that is of interest and value to youth. So if there might be something like key job skills for the 21st century, basically, that they're going to be working on through this youth program. Or it might be focused on their identity and challenges that they face as a Muslim. And one of the things that I love, I don't mean to just keep focusing only on MIST, but that having been the case study that I really focused on with youth programs, was that it gave a point of entry for Muslims of all different kinds of leanings religiously. You didn't have to be the hijabi or the musalla going brother either, or the beard sporting brother, right? Like it really opens itself up for everybody. And I think that that's another really important element of successful youth programs, particularly if you do want to be inclusive and create a support system truly for all Muslim youth, then you need to be creating a space that is non-judgmental and has clear guidelines, but is not overly weighty, so that people have to kind of fake it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So there should be a theme or interest that's the focus. There should be adult role models. And so again, when I think about this, I really think about inclusivity as well, that the adults should be reflective of the youth population that you are aiming for. So if you have a youth program for students, for Muslim youth that range the spectrum of ethnic and racial diversity, but you only have South Asian American Muslim adults running it, well, you might not connect as well. You might not understand the challenges that all of those students are facing. So you really need to have adult role models that reflect the youth population that you're aiming to be. There should be consistency in terms of how much people are meeting and how often they're meeting, and should have long-term goals. There should be as well potential for leadership for the youth, leadership opportunities in terms of being a team lead or directing certain elements of the program. And finally, there should be review cycles where the youth are asked for their feedback and it's actually implemented in school. Yeah.
Yeah.
School, I'm sorry, the youth program.
Yeah. Well, then, so how does your research compare with what other studies are finding out about the challenges facing Muslim youth in America?
I think, and I think that it's justified that there's a lot of focus on the challenges.
Did you see the post on Facebook, the Greedy Question post?
I didn't see the responses today. What was?
I didn't get to see it today.
Okay.
You have a look. I looked at it 2 days ago, I think, when people were posting. So we did have a few comments, and with the votes, it was a little bit scattered. But I think majority did vote for the issue of peer pressure, that being a challenge.
Yeah, when I looked yesterday, I saw peer pressure. You know, the
maintaining belief as well. I think that was.
And the pull to be engaged in common youth activities, and youth activities are, you know, however positive or not, right? And in particular with our religion, premarital sex or intimate relationships with the opposite sex or even the same sex are very strong for youth, and I do agree that that is a challenge. And I do see a lot of studies focusing on the challenges that youth are facing and painting a picture where justifiably there are adults and professionals that need to step in and really support the youth in navigating these challenges. Just yesterday, the Family and Youth Institute published a report on bullying, using a lot of data that another major organization here in the US, CARE, Council for American Islamic Relations, had published. And, you know, sharing that Muslim youth are being bullied because of their religion and their identity. So there is a lot of focus in the research on these challenges. I'd like to think that my research, you know, I went in actually thinking that there would be a lot that the kids would identify as being overwhelming or just difficult for them, their social emotional health and their mental health to be able to be dealing with in a healthy way. But subhanAllah, many of the youth that I spoke to did identify those challenges: Islamophobia, bullying, teachers even being very aggressive or, you know, kind of, I don't know what the report yesterday, the FYI, also I labeled it under the broader umbrella of bullying. You know, the teachers are also perpetrating that. But the youth also talked about having a sense of empowerment and strength. And I think that some of that does come out of the fact that these interviews were being taken with students who were participating in MIST. And so they did have a support structure. They had some kind of after school club that they created in their school to be able to go and participate in MIST as a team. So that right there was a support system. And then being able to go into MIST and see these youth, other youth who are obviously also going through the same struggles as them. So I saw a lot of positivity and a sense of empowerment, albeit through different kinds of struggles that they were facing. You know, there's that ebb and flow, those phases that you go through where you go through that challenge, but then you come out stronger. And when I was speaking to these students, there was a lot of that sense of, you know what, I learned how to deal with that. I remember there was this one young girl that had a really powerful interview. She told me stories of how she was once on the bus and she was called an effing sandbag. I didn't even know, you know, really horrible racial slurs, told her to go back home. And what was so moving to me, I think I cried listening to the interview as I was transcribing it because it was just so powerful, that what was more hurtful to her was not that she was called those names, but that she felt unable and did not stand up against that bully, against that person. And later on, for their MIST team, they were fundraising. and they were doing a car wash. And I remember, again, she shared that, you know, she felt so embarrassed because somebody asked what the MSA stood for, and she said, like, Minority Student Alliance. She didn't want to say Muslim Student Association. She didn't want to be identified as a Muslim explicitly at that time to these strangers that were coming to get their car washed, you know. But as we spoke, she also talked about feeling pride in being an ambassador of Islam. This was a term that the youth actually, they were Shia Ismaili, and she said that their imam spoke about being ambassadors. And so it was the language that they used. And whether or not you hear youth say that, I didn't hear it in all my interviews, but they certainly reflected on that role that they had and were able to see, yes, they felt pressure and the weight of that, because as an ambassador, you're representing millions, if not billions of people, right? Like 1 billion Muslims worldwide. And that's not easy for a teenager to do. They don't even know what it means to be Muslim themselves all the time. So it is very weighty, but then they also, many of them identified this sense of like opportunity, like, hey, I can put a positive spin on things. And that's pretty powerful. And so alhamdulillah, I was excited that my research showed a lot of that sense of empowerment coming through these youth, and especially with that support system that they were able to create with just peers themselves, like young adults. I think that that's wonderful. I think our religion really supports that. The concept of, you know, being treated as a child and not having many responsibilities. You know, when we look at what our religious obligations, when they start, it's once we hit puberty, and there is that, if that's not the greatest sense of accountability, you know, to Allah, then what is, right? That we have to, we're accountable to Allah for praying and all of the other obligations that we have as a Muslim. Well, let's start as adults, teachers and youth development leaders, start giving our youth the platform and the support system and the leadership skills to take that on and really harness that. They are the best individuals here right now to change the way things are going for Muslims, particularly I feel in the US, but I imagine also in other countries that have similar socio-political climates.
Yes. Your findings about Muslim Americans different and similar simultaneously. Could you elaborate on what this means?
The last question that I asked my participants was, what would you want to tell someone, anyone, about being a Muslim American? And overwhelmingly, they were like, we're just the same as all other teenagers. The only things that make us different, and this isn't to minimize this difference, is our belief and practices as Muslims. And also many of them recognized Islamophobia. So the kind of that particular challenge as creating a unique element to their lives and identity. But, you know, they would say things like, we participate in the same activity, we go to the movies just like all other youth, or we go to the mall, or, you know, we're not, I remember one kid said, we're not aliens. Or like they would answer the question so matter-of-factly, like, oh, we're just the same. We're the same as everyone else. Like, can you just understand that? Like a sense of kind of frustration. And so there was that sense of like, we are just the same, but also a recognition, hey, yeah, we are different because when we don't celebrate Christmas, and, you know, we do pray 5 times, we might need a space to pray in school. And we do have Eid, you know, these kinds of other things. But in general, we are normal teenagers, and we want to be treated that way.
How empowering and how relieving would it have felt for them to be able to share these experiences out loud and amongst each other as well?
Alhamdulillah, they did. Many of them did indicate that it was a very powerful thing for them to just be involved in sharing their experiences. And alhamdulillah, I feel honored that they trusted me with that, and that I'm able to sit here and share some of that with you guys. I know that everyone else has their own stories and their experiences and perspectives that they've gained from their work with youth. And I do wonder, I look forward to reading the comments and seeing how these findings and this research resonates or is different from what everyone else has experienced.
Speaking on my behalf, I believe I can resonate as me being a youth once upon a time. So listening to those stories, and now as an adult and as an educator, my responsibilities and what we must do for our students and our children, inshallah.
Absolutely.
To empower them and to provide them those leadership opportunities.
Alhamdulillah, it's a great blessing to have gone through these challenges and to have gained perspective and to be able to work with youth so that we can use that to inform what we're doing. Alhamdulillah, it's a blessing.
And thank you so much for sharing this all with us. I'm sure a lot of us will be reflecting and having our discussions tomorrow together about this. I know I do with my colleagues after every interview, so.
Alhamdulillah, I'm grateful for the platform.
As well. Thank you so much for taking the time.
Jazakallah.
What time is it at the moment? I think it's 6 a.m.
It is 6 a.m. Yes, it is. Alhamdulillah.
I'll reward you. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Jazakallah khair.
We're going to wrap it up, but for the members who are viewing, please continue posting within the poll. We are quite interested in analysing the comments. It's been very insightful and quite interesting sharing stories, I think, amongst each other. So we'll keep that going, inshallah. Thank you, Dr. Shaza. I'll keep in touch with you in case you have any resources that you could provide for us in terms of youth programs and where to from here, inshallah.
Inshallah. Thank you, Sama. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. Take care.